Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've been cooped up in my apartment for what felt like forever, so when things started opening up again, I made a promise to myself to get out more. The park near my place became my go-to spot. It had benches, decent shade, and was quiet enough that I could actually focus on my assignments. That afternoon I needed to finish an essay for my literature class. The deadline was approaching fast, and I've been procrastinating for days. I grabbed my laptop, threw on a comfortable hoodie, and headed out. The park wasn't too crowded. A few kids were playing football on the field, some joggers passed by occasionally, and there were a couple of dog walkers. I found my usual bench under a tree and got to work. The essay was about symbolism in classic novels, and I was finally getting into a good rhythm with my writing. After about 20 minutes, I felt someone staring at me. I looked up and saw this woman standing maybe 30 feet away. She was just looking at me with this weird expression on her face. I figured maybe she was waiting for someone or just zoning out, so I went back to typing. 5 minutes passed. She was still there, still staring. It was starting to get uncomfortable, but I tried to ignore it and focus on my work. I had already written 3 paragraphs and was making good progress. Then she started walking toward me. My stomach did this little flip because something about the way she moved seemed off. She walked right up to my bench and actually reached out and patted my shoulder. I looked up at her and asked what she wanted. She asked me if I knew where I was. I was completely confused by the question and told her yes. She then asked why I wasn't playing with the other kids. I blinked at her. Was she serious? I gestured toward the football game happening across the field and explained that I didn't know them and that I didn't like football anyway. She put her hands on her hips and shook her head like I just said something outrageous. She told me that was nonsense and that since I was a boy, I should be playing football instead of playing video games. I tried to explain that I wasn't playing video games and that I was doing my homework, but she cut me off. She suddenly gasped really loudly and accused me of selling drugs. My brain basically short-circuited. What was happening right now? I tried to tell her no and explain what I was actually doing, but she interrupted me again. She called me a liar and said she was calling the police. She pulled out her phone and started dialing. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I knew I wasn't doing anything wrong. My laptop screen literally had a document open with citations and everything. But the way she was acting made me panic anyway. I looked down at my laptop and saw her eyes darting toward it. Something in her expression changed. Before I could process what was happening, she reached out and tried to grab it off the table. I reacted on pure instinct. I yanked the laptop away from her and pulled it against my chest, wrapping both arms around it. She tried to grab it again, but I held on tight. My essay was on there, all my notes, my entire semester's worth of work. She demanded I give it to her and claimed I was hiding evidence. I yelled at her to get away from me. She kept trying to pry the laptop from my hands while yelling into her phone. I don't know what she was saying to the police because I was too focused on keeping my laptop safe. People in the park were starting to stare. Some had stopped what they were doing to watch. I felt humiliated and terrified at the same time. It felt like forever before the police actually arrived, but it was probably only about 10 minutes. 2 officers approached the bench. The woman immediately rushed over to them, talking rapidly and pointing at me. I stayed on the bench, still clutching my laptop. I couldn't hear everything she was saying, but I caught bits and pieces. She pointed at my hoodie and told them I was obviously into shady things because of what I was wearing. One of the officers walked over to me while the other one stayed with her. He asked if I could show him what was on my computer. My hands were shaking when I opened the laptop and turned it toward him. The screen showed my half-finished essay, the research tabs I had open, and my college portal in the background. The officer looked at it for maybe 30 seconds, then nodded and called his partner over. They both examined the screen. I pointed out the document, showed them the date it was created, explained what the assignment was about. They seemed satisfied pretty quickly. The first officer walked back over to the woman and told her she was under arrest for false reports and harassing me. Her face went bright red. She shouted that they couldn't do that and demanded they arrest me instead, calling me disgusting. She pointed at me again, but the officers weren't having it. One of them took her arm and started leading her toward the patrol car. She kept yelling the entire way, saying they were making a mistake, that I was dangerous, that they needed to search me. The other officer stayed behind and asked me a few more questions. He apologized for the trouble and suggested I might want to file a report if she damaged anything or if I wanted to press charges for attempted theft. I was so drained I just wanted to go home, but I took his card and said I'd think about it. I watched when they put her in the back of the car. She was still gesturing wildly and shouting, though I couldn't hear her anymore. Some of the people who'd been watching gave me sympathetic looks. A few came over and asked if I was okay. I packed up my laptop and left the park. My hands didn't stop shaking until I got home. The whole thing had been so bizarre and random. I texted my friends about what happened and they couldn't believe it. One of them said I should definitely share the story because nobody would believe how crazy it was otherwise. I never did finish that essay at the park. I ended up completing it at home that night, though it took me a while to focus again. I grew up in a normal household with loving parents and a younger sister. We weren't rich, but we had everything we needed. That all changed when I was 8 years old. One night, I woke up feeling groggy and stumbled to the bathroom. I must have fallen asleep on the toilet because the next thing I remember is waking up to intense heat and smoke filling the air. The fire alarms were blaring, but I hadn't heard them while I was out. I could hear my parents screaming my name from somewhere in the house, but the smoke was so thick I could barely see. They couldn't find me because they didn't think to check the bathroom. Panic set in as I realized I needed to get out. I crawled along the floor where the air was slightly clearer and managed to make it to a window. I don't remember much after that except the pain. My entire body was covered in burns. The firefighters got me to the hospital where I spent months recovering. I had surgery after surgery to repair the damage. The doctor said I was lucky to be alive, but it didn't feel that way at the time. Eventually, my body healed and looked relatively normal again. But my face was a different story. The scarring on my face was severe. The doctors did what they could, but there was only so much that could be done. They explained that the burns had damaged the deeper layers of skin in a way that made reconstruction difficult. When I finally went back to school, the bullying started immediately. Kids are cruel when they don't understand something. They called me monster, freak, and worse. Some days I wished I had never made it out of that house. It took years of therapy to get past those dark thoughts. My therapist helped me understand that what happened wasn't my fault, and that I deserved to live a full life. Even now as an adult, I still feel self-conscious about my appearance. I started wearing masks long before the pandemic made it socially acceptable. It just made life easier. I didn't have to deal with the stares or the whispered comments. Most people didn't think twice about it anymore, especially after 2020. The pandemic actually gave me a strange sense of relief because suddenly everyone was wearing masks and I blended in for once. Today started like any other day. I decided to grab some food from the nearest fast food place. I walked into the restaurant and placed my order at the counter. The employee didn't even look at my mask. I ordered a burger meal and paid $7.50. I moved to the waiting area to watch for my number on the screen. A few minutes later, a woman walked in with 3 kids trailing behind her. They were loud and already causing a scene before they even reached the counter. One of the kids was complaining about wanting chicken nuggets, while another was pulling on the display stands. The woman didn't seem to care about controlling them at all. One of the kids, a boy who looked about 6 or 7, spotted me standing there and tugged on his mother's shirt. The kid asked his mom why I was wearing a mask. I looked over but didn't think much of it. Kids ask questions. It's what they do. The woman told her son that I was just mentally deranged and that he shouldn't worry about me. I felt my jaw clench behind the mask. I've heard comments like that before. Ignorant people making assumptions without knowing anything about me or my situation. Usually I just ignore it and move on. Life's too short to fight every battle. She ordered her food and I turned my attention back to the screen, watching the numbers change as orders were prepared. Then I heard footsteps approaching. I looked up and saw her walking straight toward me. Her kids were still at the counter arguing over what toys they wanted with their meals. She asked me why I was wearing the mask. I told her it was personal and that I'd rather not talk about it. She asked if I was sick or something. I told her no. She said that I should take it off then. I asked her what she meant and why I would do that. She told me I was traumatizing her children by wearing that thing. She said they were scared and confused. She demanded I take it off so they could see I was a normal person. She crossed her arms like she was some kind of authority figure who had the right to make demands. This woman had the audacity to walk up to a complete stranger and demand they remove something they were wearing. The mask wasn't hurting anyone. It wasn't offensive. It was just a piece of fabric covering my face. I noticed a few other customers starting to look over at us. The situation was drawing attention, and I could feel people watching. But then an idea popped into my head, a way to shut her up without causing a scene or getting into an argument. I felt a small smile form beneath the mask. I told her that she was right and that I would take it off. Her eyes lit up like she had just won some kind of victory. She even smirked a little, probably thinking she had put me in my place. I slowly reached up and pulled the mask down, angling my face so only she could see the scarring. The burns had left deep tissue damage that created an uneven texture across my cheeks and jawline. My skin was discolored in patches, and the scarring extended down my neck. Some areas were raised while others were sunken in. It wasn't pretty and I knew it. Her expression changed instantly. The smug look vanished and was replaced with shock. Her mouth fell open slightly and she took a small step backward. The color drained from her face. She didn't say anything. She just stood there staring. I let her take it all in for a few seconds. At that moment, the screen showed my order number was ready. Perfect timing. I told her goodbye and pulled my mask back up. I walked past her to the counter, grabbed my bag of food, and headed for the door. I could feel her eyes on me the whole way out, but she didn't say another word. When I passed by her kids at the counter, they didn't even notice me. They were too busy fighting over the toys. I got in my car and drove home with a sense of satisfaction I hadn't felt in a while. The whole drive back, I kept replaying the look on her face in my mind. When I told my friends about it later that week, they all laughed. We joked about the look on her face and how she probably felt like an idiot. One of them said she got exactly what she asked for. I laugh about it too now. But honestly, I still don't understand why anyone would demand that a stranger remove their mask. I rescued my rabbit when she was just a few days old. Her mother had kicked her out of the nest, and I found her barely alive in my backyard. For weeks I bottle-fed her every few hours, barely sleeping. She grew into the most affectionate little creature I'd ever known. Unlike most rabbits, she was incredibly tame and bonded to me like a dog would. She followed me around, came when I called her, and even enjoyed being held, though only by me. Anyone else who tried would find themselves gently but firmly rejected. I could take her anywhere. She wore a little harness and leash, and we'd go for walks together. People always stopped to stare at the sight of someone walking a rabbit, but she handled it all with surprising grace. The only quirk was that she could be territorial. If someone got too close or tried to touch her without permission, she'd thump her back feet on the ground, a warning. The trouble started on what should have been a routine day. My rabbit had suffered from coccidia when she was young, a nasty parasitic infection common in rabbits. The vet had recommended preventative shots twice a year to keep it from coming back. We were almost at the clinic, just 5 minutes away, when I noticed a woman and her son walking toward us. The kid looked to be around 7 or 8 years old. His eyes lit up when he saw my rabbit. Before I could react, he lunged forward and tried to grab her. My rabbit squeaked and scrambled away from him, racing back to me and immediately starting to thump her feet against the sidewalk. I knew that sound. She was scared and angry. I bent down to comfort her, stroking her ears gently. Before I could say anything, the mother approached with a smile on her face. She thanked me for catching her son's rabbit. I stared at her, completely confused. I picked up my rabbit and quickly clipped the leash to her harness. I told her I didn't understand what she meant. She explained that it was her son's rabbit and told me to hand it over. Her son stood behind her, nodding eagerly. I asked her what gender she thought the rabbit was. She said it was a boy and demanded I hand him over before she called the police. I felt my jaw tighten. My rabbit was female, and I'd raised her from when she was practically newborn. There was no way this woman's son had ever owned her. I told her my rabbit was actually female, and that I'd had her since she was a baby. I explained she was even microchipped and offered to go to the vet right now to check. The woman called me a liar. She repeated that the rabbit was a male and belonged to her son. She refused to accept my explanation and threatened to call the police. I told her the police would say the exact same thing I was saying since my rabbit was chipped. I explained we could verify ownership at the vet and mentioned I was heading there anyway. I started walking, holding my rabbit close to my chest. She nestled into me, still thumping occasionally. The woman and her son followed me, the mother complaining the entire way. She kept saying I was trying to steal her son's pet. Her son kept whining that he wanted his rabbit back. When we arrived at the clinic, I checked in at the front desk. The receptionist saw the woman behind me and raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything. Because of the delay, they took me back immediately. The vet came in and smiled at my rabbit, then looked at the woman and child with confusion. She asked why I had brought them along. Before I could answer, the woman shrieked that the rabbit wasn't mine and belonged to her son. The vet blinked, then said she'd get the chip reader to check who the legal owner was. The vet scanned my rabbit and asked for both of our IDs. She compared the information on the chip to my ID, then looked at the woman. She confirmed that the chip was registered to me and that I was the legal owner. The chip showed my name, address, and phone number. The woman's face turned red. She said the chip must be fake. The vet told her the chip was legitimate and had been registered months ago. The woman grabbed her son's hand and stormed out of the clinic without another word. The vet and I proceeded with the appointment, and my rabbit got a shot without any fuss. I paid the $75 fee for the visit and vaccination. I was about to leave when the door opened again. 2 police officers walked in, followed by someone in a wildlife ambulance uniform. Behind them were the woman and her son. One of the officers said they'd received a report of a stolen rabbit. The vet immediately stepped forward and told them this was a false report. She explained that we'd already checked the microchip and confirmed I was the legal owner. The wildlife ambulance worker nodded and said that was exactly why he was there. He mentioned that since we'd already checked once, he'd verify it again from a neutral position. I told him that was fine with me. The vet agreed. The woman tried to step between us and the wildlife worker. She argued that in the time it took them to arrive, we could have implanted a chip just to frame her son. She said it had been at least 30 minutes since she left the clinic. The wildlife worker stared at her and explained that implanting a chip and registering it takes at least an hour. He told her the rabbit was already chipped long before today. He warned her that if she didn't let him do his job, she'd be charged with obstructing procedure. She stepped back, fuming. The wildlife worker scanned my rabbit again, checked both of our IDs, and confirmed what the vet had already told them. He said clearly that I was the legal owner and that the chip had been registered months ago. He even pulled up the registration date on his device to show the officers. The chip had been registered over 6 months ago. The officer turned to me and asked if I wanted to press charges for false reporting and harassment. I didn't even hesitate and said absolutely. The woman's face went pale. The officers told her she'd be receiving a citation and would have to pay a fine. They mentioned the fine would likely be around $250. They also mentioned potential court fees if I decided to pursue it further. The woman started to argue, but one of the officers cut her off. He told her she had wasted their time and the time of the wildlife services. He said filing a false police report was a serious matter. The woman started crying and said she just wanted to make her son happy. Her son, meanwhile, looked bored and didn't seem to care one way or the other. The officer told her that didn't excuse what she'd done. In the end, I received compensation that covered the entire cost of the vet appointment. The compensation was $70. When they escorted her out, she kept insisting that the rabbit had belonged to her son. She said her son had lost his rabbit 2 weeks ago. I told the officers my rabbit had never been lost and had been with me every single day. The vet backed me up and showed them my appointment history. I've been bringing my rabbit in for checkups every few months for over half a year. I watched them leave, then looked down at my rabbit. She was calm now, grooming herself in my arms like nothing had happened. The vet laughed and shook her head, saying that was certainly a first. She mentioned she'd never seen someone try to claim ownership of a chipped animal before. I carried my rabbit out of the clinic, relieved that the whole ordeal was over. She thumped her feet one last time when we walked past the spot where the woman had first confronted me. I gave her a treat when we got home and she happily munched on it. She deserved it after everything she'd been through that day. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.